Human, if you stop, I'll kill you. The Chalnoth female's frenzied scream echoed through the containment chamber, her claws digging into Ethan Scott's shoulders. The human scientist gritted his teeth, his muscles burning as he struggled to keep pace with the alien's relentless demands. 24 hours earlier, Ethan had been summoned to the Chalnoth High Council on the alien planet Chalnar. As he entered the Grand Hall, the tension in the air was palpable. The council members, tall, reptilian beings with iridescent scales, sat in a semicircle, their usually stoic faces etched with worry. Dr. Scott, the head counselor, began, "We face extinction." The words hung heavy in the air. Ethan listened intently as they explained the crisis. Chalnoth females entered an intense breeding season once every 50 years, requiring continuous mating for 72 hours. Failure to complete this cycle meant certain death for the female. With Chalnoth males becoming increasingly infertile, their species teetered on the brink of collapse. The council's proposal shocked Ethan to his core. They wanted him, a human, to attempt breeding with a Chalnoth female named Horus during her upcoming cycle. Ethan's mind raced with ethical concerns and questions about biological compatibility. The council, anticipating his hesitation, revealed they had been secretly studying human physiology for years. They believed Ethan's DNA might be compatible enough to produce viable offspring. Horus herself had volunteered for this unprecedented experiment, fully aware of the risks and the weight of her species' survival resting on its success. Ethan, recognizing the potential diplomatic benefits for humanity, reluctantly agreed to participate. With the breeding season set to begin in a mere 24 hours, Ethan was ushered into a specially designed containment chamber. The room was a marvel of alien technology, equipped with life support systems, monitoring equipment, and emergency protocols. As the door sealed shut behind him, Ethan took in his surroundings. The chamber was spacious, with padded walls and a large central area clearly designed for the impending mating ritual. Ethan's mind whirled with the enormity of the task before him. The council had warned him about the intensity of Chalnoth mating behaviors, but their words seemed woefully inadequate in the face of what he was about to experience. He paced the chamber, trying to prepare himself mentally and physically for the challenge ahead. As the hours ticked by, Ethan's anxiety grew. He knew that failure wasn't an option, not just for the sake of interspecies diplomacy, but for the very survival of the Chalnoth race. The weight of this responsibility pressed down on him, making each passing minute feel like an eternity. Finally, a low hum signaled the opening of a secondary door. Ethan's heart raced as he turned to face his partner in this bizarre experiment. Horus entered the chamber, her reptilian form both alien and oddly beautiful. Her scales shimmered with an intensity Ethan hadn't seen in other Chalnoth, a sign of her breeding cycle beginning. Their eyes met, and in that moment, Ethan saw a mix of determination, fear, and primal need in Horus's gaze. As the door sealed behind her, leaving them alone in the chamber, Ethan steeled himself for the 72 hours that would determine the fate of an entire species. Little did he know that his endurance would be pushed far beyond what any human had experienced before, and that the desperate cry of, "Human, if you stop, I'll kill you," would become a mantra driving him to limits he never thought possible. As the door sealed behind Horus, Ethan felt the full weight of the situation descend upon him. The Chalnoth female's eyes locked onto his, a primal intensity radiating from her gaze. For a moment they stood frozen, the air thick with anticipation. Suddenly a holographic display flickered to life on the chamber wall. A gruff Chalnoth scientist appeared, his scales a dull green in contrast to Horus's vibrant hues. "Dr. Scott, we have limited time. Pay close attention," the scientist said, his voice gravelly. "Constant physical contact is crucial during the entire 72-hour cycle. Any prolonged break could prove fatal for Horus." Ethan nodded, his mouth dry. "Understood. What else should I know?" The scientist launched into a rapid-fire briefing on Chalnoth physiology. Ethan absorbed as much as he could, his mind racing to process the alien biology. As the scientist spoke, Horus paced the chamber restlessly, her claws clicking against the floor. Hours ticked by, filled with nervous preparation and last-minute instructions. Ethan tried to steel himself for what was to come, but nothing could truly prepare him for the intensity that awaited. Without warning, alarms blared throughout the facility. The sound reverberated through the chamber, signaling the onset of the breeding season. Horace's head snapped toward Ethan, her pupils dilating. In a blur of motion, she lunged. Her powerful body slammed into Ethan, pinning him against the wall. The air rushed from his lungs as Horace's claws dug into his shoulders. "Human," she hissed, her breath hot against his face. "We begin now." What followed was a whirlwind of constant physical exertion. Horace's strength and stamina far surpassed anything Ethan had experienced. Her demands were relentless, her needs insatiable. Ethan's muscles burned as he struggled to keep pace, acutely aware that any pause could mean Horace's death. The chamber's life support systems hummed continuously, working overtime to maintain Ethan's vitals. Nutrient-rich mist periodically filled the air, providing essential sustenance and hydration. Despite these aids, Ethan felt himself being pushed to his limits. As hours blended into days, Ethan noticed subtle changes in Horace's biology. Her body temperature fluctuated wildly, causing her scales to shift from cool to blazing hot against his skin. More strikingly, her scales began to emit a faint bioluminescent glow, pulsing in rhythm with her movements. These changes seemed to correlate with peaks in Horace's mating frenzy. During these intense periods, her strength doubled, and her already considerable stamina reached new heights. Ethan found himself constantly adapting, struggling to navigate these new challenges. Midway through the second day, Ethan's body began to betray him. Painful cramps seized his muscles, and periods of disorientation left him reeling. The monitoring equipment beeped urgently, detecting his distress. The chamber's speakers crackled to life. "Dr. Scott, we're introducing a stimulant into the atmosphere," a Chalnoth voice announced. "It should enhance your endurance without compromising the experiment." A sweet metallic scent filled the air. As Ethan breathed it in, a surge of energy coursed through his body. The pain in his muscles faded, replaced by a tingling sensation. His mind sharpened, the fog of exhaustion lifting. However, the stimulant had an unexpected side effect. Ethan's sensory perception heightened dramatically. Every touch, every sound, every subtle shift in the air became amplified. He could feel the individual scales on Horace's skin, hear the rhythmic beating of her heart. This increased sensitivity led to an unforeseen development. Ethan began to notice patterns in Horace's nonverbal cues and physiological responses. The way her pupils contracted just before a surge of energy, the slight change in her body temperature that preceded a shift in her needs. As the third day dawned, Ethan found himself anticipating Horace's requirements with increasing accuracy. He began to match her rhythm, his movements syncing with hers in a strange, alien dance. This synchronization allowed for more efficient energy expenditure, giving Ethan a much-needed edge. Horace seemed to sense this change. Her aggressive behavior began to soften, moments of gentleness emerging between the frenzied bouts. During one such moment, her eyes met Ethan's, and he saw something new there, a glimmer of recognition, perhaps even gratitude. The chamber's speakers crackled again. "Remarkable," a Chalnoth scientist murmured. "This level of connection between mates is unprecedented in our species. The combination of human and Chalnoth biology may be yielding unexpected benefits." As the 72-hour mark approached, both Ethan and Horace showed signs of extreme exhaustion. The chamber's systems worked at maximum capacity, bathing them in nutrient mists and pumping out excess heat. Ethan's muscles trembled with fatigue, his vision blurring at the edges. Just as Ethan felt he couldn't endure another moment, Horace's body began to emit a brilliant, pulsating light. The glow emanated from deep within her, growing stronger with each passing second. "Fertilization confirmed," a jubilant voice announced over the speakers. "Dr. Scott, you've done it." Relief washed over Ethan, but there was no time to celebrate. Horace's body went rigid, her claws tightening around him. "Human," she gasped, "we're not finished yet." Ethan summoned his last reserves of strength, pushing through the final moments of the mating cycle. As the light from Horace's body reached its peak intensity, she let out a primal roar that shook the chamber. Then, abruptly, She collapsed into Ethan's arms, slipping into a deep hibernation-like sleep. The chamber door hissed open, and a medical team rushed in. As they lifted Horace's unconscious form onto a stretcher, Ethan's legs gave out. Strong hands caught him, easing him onto another stretcher. As the medical team whisked him away to an advanced recovery unit, Ethan caught a glimpse of the Chalnoth scientists crowding around Horace. Their instruments beeped and whirred, confirming the presence of viable embryos. The last thing Ethan saw before unconsciousness claimed him was the head counselor's face, beaming with a mixture of joy and awe. In that moment, Ethan realized that he had not only potentially saved the Chalnoth species, but had also opened up a new frontier in interspecies relations. As darkness enveloped him, Ethan's final thought was of the challenges and discoveries that surely lay ahead, both for him and for the unprecedented offspring he had helped create. Ethan's eyes fluttered open, the sterile white ceiling of the medical facility coming into focus. The soft hum of advanced medical equipment filled the air as he slowly regained consciousness. His body felt heavy, every muscle aching with a deep, bone-weary exhaustion he had never experienced before. "Welcome back, Dr. Scott," a gentle voice said from his left. Ethan turned his head to see a Chalnoth doctor, her scales a soft blue-green, checking his vitals on a holographic display. "You've been unconscious for 3 days. Your body needed time to recover from the intensity of the mating cycle." Ethan tried to speak, but his throat was dry and raw. The doctor offered him a glass of water with a straw, which he sipped gratefully. As the cool liquid soothed his parched throat, memories of the past 72 hours flooded back. The relentless physical demands, the alien sensations, the desperate struggle to keep going. "Horace," he managed to croak out. The doctor's face brightened. "She's doing well. The embryos are developing at an unprecedented rate. You've achieved something truly remarkable, Dr. Scott." Over the next few days, Ethan's recovery progressed rapidly. A team of human and Chalnoth scientists subjected him to a battery of tests, their excitement palpable as they pored over the results. Ethan caught snippets of their discussions. Enhanced cellular regeneration, improved sensory acuity, fascinating physiological adaptations. On the 5th day of his recovery, Ethan received a visitor. Dr. Lyra Venn, a tall woman with close-cropped silver hair and piercing green eyes, strode into his room with an air of barely suppressed excitement. "Dr. Scott," she said, extending her hand. "I'm Dr. Lyra Venn, xenobiologist. I've been studying Chalnoth biology for over a decade, but what you've accomplished, it's beyond anything we could have imagined." Ethan shook her hand, noting the strength in her grip. "What exactly have I accomplished, Dr. Venn? Besides the obvious, I mean." Dr. Venn pulled up a chair and launched into an explanation. The embryos resulting from his mating with Horace were developing faster than any recorded Chalnoth pregnancy. More importantly, they displayed unique genetic traits that combined aspects of both species in ways that defied current scientific understanding. "But that's not all," Dr. Venn continued, her eyes shining with excitement. "The effects on your own physiology are equally fascinating. Your cellular regeneration rate has increased by 37%, and your sensory perception has been enhanced across the board. We're still trying to understand the full extent of these changes." As Ethan absorbed this information, Dr. Venn's expression grew serious. "There's something else you should know. News of the experiment's success has spread quickly. It's causing quite a stir, both here and back on Earth." She explained the growing controversy. While many Chalnoth saw the successful mating as a beacon of hope for their species, a vocal minority, led by Council member Zarthos, viewed it as a threat to their genetic purity. Protests had erupted in several Chalnoth cities, demanding an end to human involvement in their reproductive issues. "The High Council is under pressure," Dr. Venn said, "but they've also seen the potential benefits. They've decided to expand the breeding program, and they want us to oversee it." Ethan's mind reeled at the implications. "Us?" Dr. Venn nodded. "You're the only human with first-hand experience of the Chalnoth mating cycle. Combined with my knowledge of their biology, we're uniquely qualified to prepare other volunteers for what they'll face." Over the next few weeks, Ethan and Dr. Venn worked tirelessly to develop a training program for potential human volunteers. They created a series of grueling physical endurance tests, psychological evaluations, and intensive educational modules on Chalnoth physiology and culture. As they worked, Ethan found himself drawn to Dr. Ven's brilliant mind and dry sense of humor. They spent long hours discussing the intricacies of Chalnoth biology, the potential long-term effects of interspecies breeding, and the ethical implications of their work. Their progress was interrupted by news that Horus had emerged from her post-mating hibernation. Ethan rushed to the medical wing where she was being monitored. As he entered her room, their eyes met, and a jolt of recognition passed between them. "Human," Horus said, her voice softer than Ethan remembered. "You survived." Ethan approached her bedside, noting the subtle glow emanating from her scales. "So did you. How do you feel?" Horus placed a clawed hand on her abdomen. "I feel life. Strong life. You have given our people hope, Ethan Scott." Their moment was interrupted by a commotion in the hallway. Dr. Venn burst into the room, her face pale. "Ethan, we have a problem. There's a crowd gathering outside the facility. They're demanding to see Horus and you." Ethan moved to the window and saw a sea of Chalnoth faces, some angry, others curious. At the front of the crowd stood a tall, imposing Chalnoth with obsidian scales. Even from a distance, the hatred in his eyes was palpable. "Zarthos," Horus hissed, her claws digging into the bedsheets. As Ethan watched the crowd grow, a ping from his communication device drew his attention. It was a message from Earth, marked urgent. The United Earth government had caught wind of the situation on Shalnar and was dispatching a team of diplomats and ethicists to assess the situation. Ethan turned to Dr. Venn, his mind racing. "We need to move fast. If we can't show concrete progress by the time that Earth delegation arrives, this whole project could fall apart." Dr. Venn nodded grimly. "I have an idea, but you're not going to like it. We need to analyze your blood again. There's something there, a hormone or enzyme we haven't identified yet. If we can isolate it..." As she outlined her plan, Ethan felt a mix of hope and trepidation. The discovery of this mysterious substance, which Dr. Venn dubbed xenofertilase, could be the key to solving the Chalnoth fertility crisis without further human Chalnoth mating. But it also raised new questions and potential complications. Outside, the chants of the protesters grew louder. Inside, machines whirred as they began another round of blood analysis. And deep in Horus's womb, a new form of life continued to grow, oblivious to the storm brewing around it. Ethan took a deep breath, steadying himself for the challenges ahead. The next few weeks would determine not just the fate of the Chalnoth species, but potentially the future of human-alien relations across the galaxy. Ethan's eyes remained fixed on the churning crowd outside the facility, his mind racing to process the rapidly evolving situation. The ping of his communication device drew his attention back to the immediate crisis at hand. "Earth sending a diplomatic team," he announced, turning to face Dr. Venn and Horus. "We need to move quickly if we want to show progress before they arrive." Dr. Venn's expression tightened. "I have an idea, but it's not without risks. We need to analyze your blood again, Ethan. There's something there. A hormone or enzyme we haven't identified yet. If we can isolate it, we might be able to solve the Chalnoth fertility crisis without further human Chalnoth mating." As Dr. Venn outlined her plan, Ethan felt a mix of hope and trepidation. The potential discovery of this mysterious substance, which Dr. Venn dubbed xenofertilase, could be the key to averting a diplomatic disaster. But it also raised new questions and potential complications. Over the next few days, Ethan and Dr. Venn worked tirelessly in the lab, analyzing blood samples and running simulations. The facility buzzed with nervous energy as news of the impending Earth delegation spread. On the day of the diplomats' arrival, Ethan stood beside Dr. Venn in the facility's conference room, facing a panel of stern-faced humans in Chalnoth. Ambassador Marcus Holloway, a tall man with graying hair and piercing blue eyes, led the Earth contingent. "Dr. Scott, Dr. Venn," Holloway began, his voice carrying a hint of steel beneath its polite exterior. "I hope you understand the gravity of this situation. The implications of your work here extend far beyond Chalnar. The entire galaxy is watching." Ethan nodded, his throat dry. "We do, Ambassador. That's why we've been working around the clock on a potential solution. As Dr. Venn presented their findings on xenofertilase, Ethan observed the reactions around the room. The Chalnoth Council members leaned forward, their scaled faces a mix of hope and skepticism. Ambassador Holloway's brow furrowed as he listened, occasionally whispering to the xenobiologist at his side. While the potential of this xenofertilase is intriguing, Holloway said after the presentation, I have serious concerns about its long-term effects on Chalnoth physiology. We can't rush into this without thorough testing and ethical consideration. Before anyone could respond, an alarm blared through the facility. Security feeds flickered to life on the room's screens, showing a mass of protesters surging against the perimeter fences. At their head stood a tall Chalnoth with obsidian scales. Zarthos. They're breaching the outer defenses, a security officer shouted. Chaos erupted in the conference room. Chalnoth Council members argued loudly while the Earth delegation demanded immediate evacuation. Ethan locked eyes with Dr. Venn across the room, a silent understanding passing between them. We need to secure the lab, Ethan said, his voice cutting through the noise. The xenofertilase samples. If they're destroyed, we lose everything. Ambassador Holloway grabbed Ethan's arm as he moved to leave. Dr. Scott, I cannot authorize you to risk your life for this. Ethan gently but firmly removed the ambassador's hand. With all due respect, sir, I'm not asking for authorization. As Ethan and Dr. Venn raced through the facility's corridors, the sounds of conflict grew louder. They reached the lab just as a group of Chalnoth extremists rounded the corner. Seal the door, Ethan shouted, diving inside. Dr. Venn slammed her hand on the security panel, and reinforced doors slid shut with a hiss. Inside the lab, they worked feverishly to secure the xenofertilase samples. The walls shuddered with the impact of the attackers outside. Suddenly, a new sound cut through the chaos, the rhythmic thud of military transports. Through the lab's small window, Ethan saw Chalnoth soldiers pouring out of massive vehicles, their scales glinting in the harsh sunlight. The Chalnoth military, Dr. Venn breathed, a mix of relief and concern in her voice. As the soldiers pushed back the protesters, Ethan's communication device buzzed. It was a message from the medical wing. Horace's pregnancy had taken an unexpected turn. Before Ethan could process this new development, the lab doors slid open. Ambassador Holloway stood there, flanked by General Krell, the commander of the Chalnoth military. The facility is secure, Krell rumbled, his voice like gravel. But this crisis is just getting started. Holloway's face was grim. We're convening an emergency session with the High Council. Your presence is required, Dr. Scott. It seems your xenofertilase may be our best hope for preventing an interstellar incident. As they made their way to the council chambers, Ethan's mind raced. The fate of human-Chalnoth relations hung in the balance, and he found himself at the center of it all. The next few hours would determine not just the future of the Chalnoth species, but potentially the course of galactic diplomacy for generations to come. Ethan took a deep breath, steeling himself for the challenges ahead. As they entered the council chambers, he caught sight of Dr. Venn, her face set in tenacity. Whatever came next, they would face it together. Together. As the council chambers' doors closed behind them, Ethan's communication device buzzed urgently. He glanced at the screen, his eyes widening at the message from Dr. Venn. Ambassador General, Ethan said, his voice tight. We need to postpone this meeting. There's been a development with the xenofertilase project. Hours later, Ethan found himself aboard the ocean expedition vessel, Nautilus, staring out at the vast alien sea of Chalnar. The ship's hull creaked and groaned under the immense pressure as they descended into the planet's deep ocean trenches. Beside him stood Dr. Kara Venn, her eyes fixed on the sensor readouts. Ethan, look at this, Kara said, pointing to a flashing indicator on the screen. These seismic readings are off the charts. There's something down here we've never seen before. The ship's external lights illuminated the murky depths, revealing a landscape of otherworldly beauty. Bioluminescent creatures drifted past the viewports, their ethereal glow casting shifting patterns across the bridge. Suddenly, the ship's sonar pinged loudly. Massive cavern system detected, announced the Chalnoth navigator, his scales shimmering in the dim light. unknown to our records. As the Nautilus maneuvered into the vast underwater cave, Ethan felt a mix of excitement and trepidation. The cave walls glittered with veins of an unfamiliar mineral, its crystalline structure refracting the ship's lights in dazzling patterns. "That's it," Kara breathed, her eyes wide. "The mineral we need to enhance xenofertilase. It's everywhere." Their celebration was short-lived. As the crew prepared the extraction equipment, a collective gasp echoed through the bridge. Swarms of small, glowing creatures emerged from crevices in the cave walls, their bioluminescent bodies pulsing with an intricate rhythm. "Sentient," Kara whispered, watching the creatures' coordinated movements. "They're sentient, Ethan, and they seem to have a symbiotic relationship with the mineral deposits." Ethan's heart sank as he realized the implications. If we extract the mineral, we could destroy their entire ecosystem. The bridge fell silent as the weight of the decision settled over them. Ethan looked from the eager faces of his Chalnoth crew members to Kyra's troubled expression. The fate of the Chalnoth species hung in the balance, but at what cost? After a tense discussion, Ethan and Kyra reached a compromise. "We'll extract only a small portion," Ethan announced to the crew, "and we'll study these creatures, the Lumina, as we're calling them, to find an alternative solution." As the careful extraction process began, the ship's communication system crackled to life. A garbled message cut through the static, its urgency clear despite the distortion. "Under attack. Zarthos. Facility defenses failing. Horus in danger." Ethan's blood ran cold. He turned to Kyra, seeing his own fear reflected in her eyes. "We have to go back," he said, his voice hoarse. In a flurry of activity, Ethan assembled a small team for a rapid ascent to the surface. As he prepared to board the ascent pod, he grasped Kyra's hand. "Finish the extraction and study the Lumina. It might be our only backup plan." The ascent was a blur of crushing pressure and rising panic. When the pod finally breached the surface, Ethan's relief was short-lived. They had surfaced far from their intended coordinates, in a remote area of Chalnar's harsh landscape. "We'll have to go overland," Ethan told his team, eyeing the alien terrain warily. "The facility needs us." Their journey was grueling. Chalnar's twin suns beat down mercilessly as they navigated treacherous rock formations and fended off attacks from predatory creatures that seemed to materialize from the very ground itself. As they crested a final ridge, the research facility came into view. Smoke rose from several buildings, and the sound of weapon fire filled the air. Ethan's team watched in horror as Zarthos's forces clashed with General Krell's defenders. "We need to get inside," Ethan said, his mind racing. His eyes landed on a ventilation shaft, partially hidden by debris. "There. We can use the ventilation system to bypass the fighting." As they prepared to infiltrate the facility, Ethan's thoughts turned to Horus and the unborn hybrids. He could only hope they had survived the attack. Deep beneath the ocean's surface, Kyra and her team made a startling discovery. The Lumina possessed an extraordinary ability to regenerate damaged tissue, a trait that could revolutionize the xenofertilase formula. "We need to get this information to the surface," Kara said, her voice urgent. "It could change everything." As the Nautilus began its ascent, carrying its precious cargo of mineral samples and newfound knowledge, the fate of two species hung in the balance. In the research facility, Ethan and his team crawled through claustrophobic ventilation shafts, the sounds of battle echoing around them. And in the medical wing, against impossible odds, new life was about to enter a world in chaos. The convergence of these events would shape the future of human-Chalnoth relations, and perhaps the entire galaxy. But for now, Ethan focused on the immediate task at hand, reaching Horus and protecting the fragile new lives that represented hope for an entire species. But for now, Ethan focused on the immediate task at hand, reaching Horus and protecting the fragile new lives that represented hope for an entire world. Ethan's heart pounded as he crawled through the narrow ventilation shaft, the acrid smell of smoke and ozone filling his nostrils. Behind him, his team moved silently, their breath coming in short gasps. The sounds of battle echoed through the metal tunnels, growing louder as they approached the medical wing. Finally, they reached the grate overlooking the birthing chamber. Ethan peered through the slats, his eyes widening at the scene below. Horace lay on a medical bed, her scaled body heaving with effort. A team of Chalnoth doctors worked feverishly around her, their voices tense and urgent. "Now!" Ethan whispered, kicking out the grate. He dropped to the floor, his team following close behind. The medical staff whirled, startled by their sudden appearance. "Dr. Scott!" one of them exclaimed, recognizing him. "Thank the stars you're here. We're facing complications." Ethan rushed to Horace's side, taking in the array of alien medical equipment surrounding her. The monitors displayed a dizzying array of data he could barely comprehend. "What's happening?" he asked, grasping Horace's clawed hand. "The hybrid physiology is unexpected," the lead doctor explained, his scales shimmering with stress. "Our standard procedures are inadequate." Horace let out a keening cry, her body arching in pain. Ethan felt helpless, his medical knowledge utterly insufficient for this unprecedented situation. "What can I do?" he asked, desperation evident in his voice. The next hours passed in a blur of activity. Ethan found himself assisting where he could, fetching supplies and offering what comfort he could to Horace. The Chalnoth medical team worked tirelessly, adapting their techniques on the fly to accommodate the unique needs of the hybrid births. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, the first cry pierced the air. Ethan watched in awe as a tiny form emerged, scales glistening with amniotic fluid, but with undeniably human eyes blinking in the harsh light of the medical bay. 2 more births followed in quick succession. As the medical team cleaned and examined the infants, Ethan marveled at their appearance. The hybrids were a perfect blend of human and Chalnoth features. Iridescent scales covered their bodies, but their faces bore human-like expressions of curiosity as they gazed at the world around them. 2 males and 1 female, the lead doctor announced, his voice filled with wonder. And they appear to be in perfect health, despite the difficult delivery. Ethan cradled one of the newborns, feeling the warmth of its tiny body against his chest. He looked at Horace, exhausted but beaming with pride. "They're beautiful," he whispered. The moment of peace was shattered by the sound of an explosion somewhere in the facility. General Krell burst into the room, his armor scorched and dented. "The extremists have been pushed back," he rumbled, "but Zarthos escaped. He's vowed to continue his crusade against the hybrids." Before Ethan could respond, his communication device buzzed. It was Kyra. "Ethan, we're back," her voice crackled through the speaker. "You won't believe what we've discovered about the Lumina. We need to meet immediately." As if on cue, the Chalnoth High Council's summons came through on the facility's main communication system. "An emergency session has been called," the metallic voice announced. "All key personnel are required to attend immediately." Ethan looked from the newborns to Horace, torn between his desire to stay and his duty to see this through. Horace nodded weakly, understanding in her eyes. "Go," she said softly. "They need you." With a heavy heart, Ethan left the medical wing, making his way to the council chambers. He found Kara waiting outside, her eyes bright with excitement despite the chaos around them. "The Lumina have regenerative abilities beyond anything we've seen," she explained rapidly as they walked. "I think we can incorporate this into the xenofertilase formula. It could change everything." They entered the council chambers to find a scene of barely controlled chaos. Ambassador Holloway and his team sat on one side, their faces grim. The Chalnoth counselors filled the other side, their scales reflecting the harsh light as they argued amongst themselves. As Kyra began her presentation on the enhanced xenofertilase formula, Ethan's mind raced. The potential implications were staggering. A solution that could satisfy both sides of the debate, preserving Chalnoth genetic diversity without the need for direct human involvement. However, the council's reactions were mixed. Some saw hope in the new developments, while others remained skeptical. The debates grew heated, voices rising as arguments flew back and forth. Suddenly, an urgent message from the medical wing silenced the room. The hybrid infants were developing at an astonishing rate, already showing cognitive abilities far beyond their hours-old status. The council erupted into fresh arguments, the implications of this new information sending shockwaves through the assembly. As Ethan tried to process this latest development, His security device blared an alarm. His blood ran cold as he read the message. Zarthos and his loyalists had breached the lower levels, heading straight for the laboratories containing the xenofertilase and Lumina specimens. Without hesitation, Ethan stood. "We need to stop them," he announced to the stunned council. "If they destroy our research, we lose everything we've worked for." Ambassador Holloway rose to join him. "I'll come with you," he said, his face set with willpower. "This is too important to leave to chance." As they rushed from the council chambers, Ethan's mind whirled with the magnitude of what was at stake. The fate of two species hung in the balance, and the next few minutes would determine the course of their shared future. With Zarthos closing in on the labs and the hybrid infants developing in ways no one could have predicted, Ethan knew they were racing against time. The convergence of these crises would shape the destiny of humans and Chalnoth alike, and he was at the center of it all. Ethan and Ambassador Holloway raced through the corridors of the research facility, their footsteps echoing off the metal walls. The acrid smell of smoke and ozone lingered in the air, a stark reminder of the recent battle. As they descended into the lower levels, the facility's emergency lighting cast an eerie red glow over everything. "We need to move faster," Ethan said, his breath coming in short gasps. "If Zarthos destroys our research, we lose everything." They rounded a corner and came face to face with their first obstacle. A makeshift barricade of overturned tables and lab equipment blocked their path. Behind it stood a group of Chalnoth scientists, their scales shimmering with tension as they pointed energy weapons at Ethan and the ambassador. "Stop right there," one of the scientists called out. "We won't let you corrupt our species any further." Ethan raised his hands slowly, his mind racing. "We're not here to harm anyone," he said, trying to keep his voice calm. "We just want to protect the research that could save your entire species." Before the standoff could escalate, a series of explosions rocked the facility. The floor shuddered beneath their feet, and distant alarms began to wail. "Zarthos," Ambassador Holloway muttered. "He's destroying the labs." Taking advantage of the momentary distraction, Ethan lunged forward, tackling the nearest scientist. The ambassador followed suit, and chaos erupted in the narrow corridor. Energy blasts scorched the walls as Ethan and Holloway fought their way through the barricade. As they pressed on, Ethan's communication device buzzed. Dr. Ven's voice crackled through, tinged with awe and urgency. "Ethan, you won't believe this. The hybrid infants, they're developing at an unprecedented rate. They've reached toddler stage in a matter of hours." Ethan's mind reeled at the implications. "How is that possible?" he asked, ducking under a swinging fist from another Chalnoth scientist. "We don't know yet," Ven replied, "but they're displaying advanced cognitive abilities and some form of telepathic communication. We need you here as soon as possible." The communication cut off as Ethan and Holloway finally broke through the last of the resistance. They sprinted down the corridor, the sounds of destruction growing louder. They burst into the main laboratory to find a scene of utter chaos. Zarthos and his followers were smashing equipment and upending containers. In the center of the room, a group of Lumina specimens floated free, their bioluminescent bodies pulsing with agitation. General Krell and a squad of Chalnoth soldiers arrived moments later, their weapons trained on the extremists. "Surrender now, Zarthos!" Krell bellowed. Instead of complying, Zarthos grabbed a nearby container and hurled it at the soldiers. The canister shattered, releasing a cloud of glowing particles into the air. Ethan's senses exploded. Colors became more vivid, sounds sharper. He could feel the heartbeats of those around him, their emotions washing over him in waves. From the stunned expressions on the faces of both humans and Chalnoth, he knew they were experiencing the same thing. Through this new, heightened awareness, Ethan sensed Zarthos' intent before he moved. As the Chalnoth extremists lunged for the central computer terminal, Ethan was already in motion. They collided with bone-jarring force, their enhanced reflexes turning the fight into a blur of motion. Ethan could anticipate Zarthos' moves, but the Chalnoth's superior strength made him a formidable opponent. As they grappled, Ethan became aware of a commotion in the corridor outside. Dr. Ven's voice cut through the chaos, filled with equal parts excitement and concern. The hybrids have undergone another growth spurt, he announced breathlessly. They've reached early adolescence, and they're changing. Ethan's momentary distraction cost him. Zarthos landed a powerful blow, sending him sprawling across the lab floor. As he struggled to his feet, he saw Zarthos reaching for a container of concentrated xenofertilase. "No!" Ethan shouted, knowing that the loss of that sample could set their research back by months. Suddenly, General Krell was there, his massive form slamming into Zarthos. The container flew from the extremist's grasp, shattering against the wall and mixing with the lumina particles still floating in the air. The resulting reaction was immediate and startling. The combined substances formed a shimmering, opalescent cloud that spread rapidly through the room. As it washed over them, Ethan felt a strange tingling sensation across his skin. Dr. Venn, who had entered the lab during the commotion, gasped in astonishment. "Incredible," he murmured, staring at a handheld scanner. "The Lumina extract seems to be stabilizing the xenofertilase compound. This could be the key to regulating the hybrid's growth rate." With Zarthos and his followers subdued, the immediate crisis began to subside. As security personnel led the extremists away, Ethan's communication device buzzed once more. It was a summons from the joint session of the Chalnoth High Council and Earth delegation. Ethan exchanged a weary glance with Ambassador Holloway. "Shall we?" he asked, gesturing towards the exit. As they made their way to the council chambers, they passed by the medical wing. Through a large observation window, Ethan caught sight of the hybrid adolescents undergoing various tests. Their appearance was a striking blend of human and Chalnoth features, iridescent scales covering powerful humanoid bodies, with faces that showed a range of all-too-human expressions. One of the hybrids turned and met Ethan's gaze. In that moment, he felt a powerful mental connection, a sense of curiosity and potential that left him breathless. The hybrid's eyes, neither fully human nor Chalnoth, seemed to hold the promise and peril of the future they had created. As they approached the council chambers, the gravity of the situation settled over Ethan like a weight. The decisions made in the next few hours would shape the course of human-Chalnoth relations for generations to come. With a deep breath, he pushed open the doors, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The massive doors swung open, revealing a chamber filled with tense faces and murmured conversations. Ethan took a deep breath, steeling himself for the task ahead. As he entered alongside Dr. Venn and Ambassador Holloway, the room fell silent. The air crackled with anticipation and unease. Ethan could feel the weight of countless eyes upon him. Chalnoth counselors with their gleaming scales, human diplomats in crisp uniforms, and a handful of scientists from both species, fidgeting nervously in their seats. Ambassador Holloway stepped forward, his voice steady as he addressed the assembly. "Esteemed members of the Chalnoth High Council and honored delegates from Earth, we come before you with urgent news regarding the hybrid program." Dr. Venn activated a holographic display showing real-time footage of the hybrid adolescents. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the crowd as they witnessed the accelerated growth. "As you can see," Dr. Venn explained, her voice tinged with a mix of awe and concern, "the hybrid subjects have reached young adulthood in a matter of days. Their cognitive and physical development has far exceeded our initial projections." Ethan watched as the council members exchanged worried glances. He opened his mouth to speak, to reassure them of the potential benefits this rapid maturation could bring, when a piercing alarm cut through the air. Red lights flashed throughout the chamber as a security officer burst through the doors. "The hybrids have escaped the medical wing," he shouted, his scales pale with fear. "They're overpowering the guards and making their way here." Chaos erupted in the council chamber. Chalnoth counselors leapt to their feet, scales dripping with alarm. Human delegates reached for communication devices, shouting orders for increased security measures. Ethan's heart raced as he turned to Ambassador Holloway. "We need to calm them down," he said urgently. "If they perceive the hybrids as a threat, everything we've worked for could be lost." Before Holloway could respond, the massive doors of the chamber burst open with a thunderous crash. A hush fell over the room as a group of figures strode in, their very presence commanding attention. Ethan's breath caught in his throat as he laid eyes on the hybrids for the first time. They were a breathtaking fusion of human and Chalnoth features. Powerful bodies covered in iridescent scales that shimmered with every movement, faces that blended the best aspects of both species, and eyes that held a depth of intelligence that sent a shiver down Ethan's spine. At the forefront stood a female hybrid, her bearing regal and confident. With a jolt, Ethan recognized features from both himself and Horus in her face. This was their daughter, he realized with a mix of awe and trepidation. The hybrid stepped forward, her gaze sweeping across the stunned assembly. When she spoke, her voice carried hints of both human and Chalnoth tones, creating a haunting melody that held everyone spellbound. "I am Zara," she announced, her words reverberating through the chamber. "We come before you not as a threat, but as the bridge between our two species and the key to the Chalnoth's survival." Murmurs of disbelief and fear rippled through the crowd. Zara raised a hand, and the room fell silent once more. "Our accelerated growth has granted us access to the combined knowledge and experiences of both humans and Chalnoth," she continued. "We have discovered a solution to the reproductive crisis that plagues the Chalnoth people." Ethan watched in amazement as Zara explained their proposal, a symbiotic relationship that went beyond mere breeding. The hybrids, she revealed, could act as living conduits, channeling the essence of xenofertilase directly into infertile Chalnoth males. Skepticism was evident on many faces in the chamber. A gruff Chalnoth counselor stood, his scales rippling with doubt. "These are bold claims," he growled. "How can we trust that this is not some elaborate deception?" Zara's eyes flashed with perseverance. "We offer proof," she declared, her gaze sweeping the room until it landed on a figure huddled in the corner, Zarthos, the extremist leader who had been brought in for judgment. With graceful strides, Zara approached the defeated Chalnoth. Zarthos flinched as she reached out, but her touch was gentle as she placed her hand on his chest. The chamber watched in stunned silence as a visible change swept through Zarthos's body. His dull scales regained their luster, and a look of wonder spread across his face. Dr. Venn rushed forward with a medical scanner, her hands shaking with excitement as she examined Zarthos. She turned to the council, her eyes wide with disbelief. It's impossible," she stammered, "but the readings are clear. Zarthos is no longer infertile." The revelation sent shockwaves through the assembly. Chalnoth counselors huddled together, their voices a mix of hope and trepidation. Human delegates conferred in hushed tones, the implications of this development clear in their animated gestures. Ambassador Holloway stepped forward, his expression one of cautious optimism. "Esteemed members of the council," he began, his voice cutting through the din, "we stand at a crossroads of unprecedented opportunity. I propose we establish a joint human Chalnoth research colony on the nearby habitable moon. There we can work alongside the hybrids to develop and refine this remarkable ability under careful observation." The chamber erupted into a flurry of debate. Ethan watched as opinions clashed and alliances shifted. He caught sight of Zarthos, still reeling from his transformation, rising slowly to his feet. Zarthos began, his voice quavering. All eyes turned to the former extremist leader. "I have been given a second chance, a miracle I never thought possible." He looked at Zara, then at the assembled council. "I renounce my past actions and beliefs. Let us embrace this new path, not just for the survival of our species, but for a future where Chalnoth and humans stand united." A hush fell over the chamber as the weight of Zarthos's words sank in. Slowly, hesitantly, the Chalnoth High Council began to nod in agreement. The human delegates, sensing the historic nature of the moment, voiced their support for Ambassador Holloway's proposal. As the council chamber buzzed with plans for the moon colony, Ethan felt a presence at his side. He turned to find Horus, her eyes shining with a mix of pride and wonder as she gazed at their hybrid children. "They are the future we never imagined," she whispered, taking Ethan's hand in hers. Ethan nodded, his heart swelling with emotion as he watched Zara and her siblings interact with the council members. The boundaries between human and Chalnoth were blurring before his eyes, giving rise to something entirely new and full of potential. As the preparations for the moon colony began in earnest, Ethan couldn't help but marvel at the journey that had brought them to this point. What had begun as a desperate experiment to save a species from extinction had blossomed into something far greater, a new chapter in the story of both humans and Chalnoth, with consequences that would ripple across the stars for generations to come.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.